Racist idiots love to talk about crime statistics. Many marginalized racial minorities commit a disproportionate amount of crime. This is true of African Americans in the United States. I am sure everyone has heard a racist blabbering about how African Americans account for 13% of the population, but commit 50% of the crime. It is a fact that many marginalized racial minorities commit disproportionate amounts of crime. Racist idiots think that this demonstrates racial inferiority. Racist idiots think that such conduct is obvious proof of their own racial superiority. They could not be more mistaken. Many far-right idiots will deploy these statistics as if they are some kind of superweapon. They will smugly sit back and point at racial crime statistics, as if this is some kind of grand debate-ending move. They expect the anti-racist to deny the crime statistics. And some anti-racists will. This is a mistake. It is a simple fact that some marginalized racial groups commit disproportionate crime. One should accept the statistics but challenge the implications asserted by the racist. The racist usually takes these implications for granted and will struggle to defend them. And indeed, these implications are not very defensible. Because a racial group committing disproportionate crime does not prove that the racial group in question is inferior. Crime statistics do not indicate the biological predispositions of a racial group. That is the reality. If racial crime rates are informed by racial biology, then why do countries across Africa have completely different homicide rates? Why does South Africa have a far higher homicide rate than Mozambique? Why does Lesotho have a far higher homicide rate than Malawi? It is almost as if crime rates have a lot to do with environmental conditions and very little to do with racial genetics. If racial genetics inform homicide rates, then why do homicide rates vary massively across Asia? If certain races have certain biological inclinations towards crime, how can there be so much variety in homicide rates? These statistical realities completely and unambiguously refute racist narratives derived from crime statistics. If crime rates were a result of genetic traits possessed by certain races, we would expect to see similarities across these races. And yet the homicide rates in specific countries differ enormously. This completely disproves the racist narrative and demonstrates that environment is the key factor. I have taken part in countless debates with racists. None of them can respond to this. They point out the crime statistics and claim that they are obvious proof of genetic inferiority. I ask them why crime rates are so inconsistent across Africa. And without exception, they fail to answer. Some European countries have higher homicide rates than some African countries. How does the racist explain that? Some African countries have lower homicide rates than the United States. Some Pacific Island states have lower homicide rates than the United States. Are Pacific Islanders the master race? When debating racists, these international homicide rate statistics are massively valuable. They completely disprove racist claims. Racists think that crime stats prove the genetic inferiority of marginalized races. Yet this claim is completely disproven by the huge diversity of crime rates across Africa. I am repeating this point because it is extremely important. It completely disproves their narrative. It is also the case that men commit a hugely disproportionate amount of crime. I do find it funny that the far right will cry about it when feminists use this data point to demonize men. But then they turn around and do the exact same thing with racial minorities. I also reject these simple-minded attempts at judging vast, diverse groups of people based on simplistic statistical trends. We should judge people as individuals. This is a far more productive way of organizing a society. Every group has dangerous members and valuable members. Idiotic racist narratives fail to grasp this reality with their simplistic, idiotic claims. And we should remember that these crime rates have social, not biological causes. Of course, impoverished, oppressed racial minorities end up committing crime at higher rates. Why would anyone be surprised by that? The other day I saw one racist trying to claim that certain races inevitably create certain societies. They said that all Asians have similar traits. They claimed that political systems are derived from fundamental racial characteristics. So explain to me why North Korea and South Korea have basically nothing in common. Explain to me how China and Taiwan are so different. Indonesia, North Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, all are Asian countries, so why do they have so little in common? If you think racial explanations for politics are so useful, then explain the difference between Singapore and North Korea. One race, two completely different societies. It is such a stupid and juvenile way of understanding politics. It is dangerous, but above all else, it is just stupid. Really, really stupid. And so easy to disprove. These simplistic racial narratives are so irrational. It is pathetic and embarrassing. If genetics and race explain political society, why are the United Arab Emirates and Yemen so different? They are both Arab countries. It is almost like race has nothing to do with it. It is almost like social and economic factors are key. And some will insist that both are similar because both are Muslim, as if this proves anything racially. There are Muslim countries in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. Racial narratives fail to explain anything. They are totally incoherent when one questions their logical conclusions for even a second. Such narratives require total thoughtlessness to survive, which is why far-right regimes spend so much time propagating total thoughtlessness. I mean, seriously. The claim that certain political societies are born out of genetic and racial differences. In the 1930s, Europe was home to fascist dictatorships, communist states, and liberal democracies. How the hell did one race have so many different systems? And yet still, some will insist that politics is downstream from racial genetics. The holes in these arguments are endless. It is shocking that a single person believes this drivel. The level of irrational thoughtlessness needed to believe this kind of thing is off the charts. Which is why fascists hate free thought, they hate academia, they want censorship and indoctrination, they murder people for criticizing them. They want radical thoughtlessness, because only in an environment of radical thoughtlessness can their stupid ideas survive. Racial explanations of political differences are weak and stupid. To return to the issue of crime statistics, far-right people will insist that crime stats justify their racism. The irony is that crime stats also say some pretty bad things about far-right people. Far-right people are heavily associated with crimes such as mass murder and terrorism. That is the reality. Just look at the statistics. The irony of smugly pointing at crime statistics when your own political group performs terribly in the crime statistics. They are heavily associated with mass murder and terrorism. It is also ironic that far-right people would consider disproportionate homicide rates to be a sign of inferiority, as if their political movement has not committed an enormous amount of homicides. The regime they idolize more than any other committed homicide with never-before-seen efficiency and scale. And now they act as if disproportionate homicide rates prove that marginalized racial minorities are somehow inferior savages. As if these far-right idiots do not salivate at the thought of committing homicide. As if they did not commit an unspeakable amount of murder last time they governed a country. As if they do not themselves follow a genocidal ideology. The overwhelming absurdity of it is amusing. Above all else, it is a reminder that these people are not rational. They are not reasonable people. They do not regard crime statistics as serious rational evidence. They regard crime statistics as a talking point that they can use to promote their grotesque worldview. The racist right is a laughable joke. Their mindless, simplistic narratives are defined by a massive amount of irrationality and stupidity. It is as if they are too dumb to understand the nuances of social and political reality, so they just adopt extremely simplistic racial narratives. It is extremely dangerous, but above all else, it is irrational and stupid.